Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Move, Talk, Thrive podcast. Today, Emily and I are going to unpack parent communication, how we turn parents around when perhaps they're not on board, and just a few of our tips and tricks to win parents over in pediatric therapy. Welcome to another episode. We are child development obsessed business besties and mums, and we're here to spill all our secrets.
We have a combined 30 years experience working with children, and each episode we will bring you up-to-date research and evidence-based strategies to set your children up to thrive.
I'm Lizzy Dawson, Australian exercise physiologist.
I'm Emily Mackey, Australian speech pathologist,
and this is the Move, Talk, Thrive podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode. It's so good to be in your ears once again.
Yes, I'm excited to be here and I love this topic because it's so important.
Yes, well, I feel like parents are the most important part of therapy, but sometimes also I wouldn't say they're the most hardest thing, but they are a very tricky thing to get right at the start.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think even like when I go to different activities with my kids, I'm conscious of my behavior and my input because I think that it can be quite intimidating.
Mm-hmm. Because you've been on the other side, you understand that as a parent, so you understand what you're giving off to the teachers and the professionals. I think I'm the same way as well. I always try to be like over friendly because I know how hard it can be when you're on the other side and you're not sure what parents are doing and you feel like you're being assessed and judged all the time because you're teaching the children.
Yeah, totally. Totally. It was interesting because I went, my kids are in Kids Heart Pilates exercise physiology sessions, and I went yesterday and I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit here quietly. Like I'm not going to parent too much because I find it quite difficult when parents come in and they don't let me do my thing in terms of engaging the kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
And how did it go? Were you able to be the parent rather than the professional?
Well, I had both my kids, so I just parented the one that wasn't actually participating in the session. But it was interesting because Flinny is in speech, and I have learned a lot through that process as a parent because I went to some of his sessions and I was like, come on, Flinny, you need to focus. Let's go. Like I was, almost disciplining, I guess, for lack of a better word. And she was like, it's actually okay. We can let him do what he needs to do. I'm happy to guide it. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was really, I felt like that communication was really helpful for me as a parent because, I'm a little bit anxious. I was a little bit concerned about his behavior and what that meant, I guess. And it was good to have her kind of just guide me through that process really confidently and calmly in a way that I was like, oh yeah, actually, this is her jam and it's actually really important for her relationship with Flynn, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's really important that the clinician feels like they can safely develop a relationship with the client, which is the child, because that's really where the focus is, and the relationship with the child can't be via the parent.
Yeah.
It has to be when they're really, really little, but over a long-term to have a long-term relationship, it has to be with the child. And then you have your own relationship with the parent, not like not going through someone.
Exactly.
If you're a therapist and you have to go through the parent all the time, like that's super frustrating in the long term. I remember I had a stuttering child when I was a new grad, and obviously stuttering comes with its own, children often have anxiety when they are stuttering, but this child had it. I was a new graduate, so I don't even know, I was still learning at that time, but I look back now and I think, okay, this child had major anxiety. And I remember, I'm not kidding you, so with stuttering therapy, back when I was doing it, we always had to get a percentage of syllables stuttered, a baseline at the start, which we don't do now. But what I did was I hid behind the reception desk and let the parents sit out in the waiting area and talk to the child. And that's a prime example of how frustrating that was, because I had to go through the parent. So you don't want to be doing that long term. We want to be developing that relationship with the children so that we can get what we need to done in therapy.
Yeah, well, I think that you need to have two relationships. You need to have one with the child and one with the parent. I think they're oh, equally important,
Yeah,
I
I would
think.
say, because the parent is then in charge of doing the homework, bringing the child to the session, saying we're
Mm.
doing this. But then the child also is equally as important, because they have to sit with you and respond to you and do the exercises that you're guiding them through. So yeah,
Yeah.
it is important. And I feel like at uni they trained us up. The focus was on the child, and it was that word rapport, and everyone was like, you've just got great rapport. But I was like, what does that mean? What does that look like? How do I actually objectively know that I'm doing this well or I'm not?
Mm.
And then rapport was very much focused on the child. But then I actually feel like I was really lost with parents, um,
Mm.
because I knew that I wanted to be a speechy because I loved children and I love working with children. I was really natural with children. But then talking to a parent is a whole different ball game. And I wasn't really taught how to do that at uni. And so then you just sort of rely on your own skills, which is you've either got it or you don't. Like naturally, we can all develop the skills, but you've got to fall on your feet a bit. But then I found it very difficult knowing how to read parents. Like you're saying, like you're very conscious when you go to activities not to have, I like to be friendly. But I found it really difficult to read parents and to understand um, their body language, because I was like, logically, I know they're bringing their child for therapy. They're paying for the session. They know that this is important because they've come, but then they're really standoffish in the session. And so I was like, I don't really know how to navigate that, which is why we're talking about it today, right?
Yeah.
I didn't really know how to navigate that. I didn't really know if they were on board or they weren't on board, because I was like, they're coming, so they must be on board. But their body language here tells me that they're not on board. But if they weren't on board, they wouldn't be coming. And it becomes this like thought process in your head of what do I actually do? And obviously, then you think, okay, I'll just try this one way. But then we've got to realize that there's so many different variety of parents and families, and way more now. So it doesn't really, like, one size fits all doesn't really work if you have that sort of approach as well. We can definitely have structure to an approach, but if you're feeling in the dark, that's really hard.
Yeah.
But I guess with me sharing that, now you know that you're not alone. If you're feeling that way, or if you're thinking, I've never really thought about this before, maybe I should actually think about this and do this right, you're not alone as well in that.
I find that the clinicians that come on board, particularly with Kids Heart Pilates, like the number one thing, and the allied health professionals that come through my course, the number one thing that I get asked about and I feel like they're anxious about is engaging the kids, and definitely complex kids, because we all know that when you can't engage a child, it's very confronting and it's very hard to do therapy. Like if we can't engage them, we can't do the intervention, right? So I think that that's always seems to be the priority. And I think that probably leads into this, you know, secondary relationship with the parent being a little bit difficult, because you putting all your energy into how do I engage the child? And then you are so consumed by that that you forget about this other relationship that is really important. And for me, when I talk about engagement, this relationship with the parent is really important, because how that parent feels about you, connects with you, is going to determine how they talk about therapy, how much they're motivated to come to therapy, how much they then take on board what you're saying and trust you and then go and practice it at home, and therefore the outcomes that the children are going to get as a result of the intervention that you are prescribing. So I think that it's such an important piece in engagement, and therapy intervention success, because the way that they think and feel about it is really going to have an impact on the child.
Absolutely. I've seen that with my own children. The way I talk about things, they will then be happy about things. If I'm a little bit reserved with something, then they will be reserved about something. Like parents have a primary role in shaping how their children see and view the world. And that's why it's so important that we have our parents on board, so that they're saying therapy is going to be so fun, like let's go. And they're really upbeat about it, so that the child's really confident coming into the sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think that it's something that can be overlooked because of that engagement piece, but it is like a fundamental piece in the engagement. I actually find that I have learned this skill because Kids Heart Pilates we traditionally just went into early childhood settings. And so the educator kind of replaces the parent piece. And you cannot, if you don't engage with the educator and help them understand why you're there, and if they're not motivated by you being there and for whatever you're there for, you're dealing with a group of children, and it's going to be really compromised. So I feel like I really honed my skills in being able to prescribe an intervention and communicate with a parent or an educator at the same time from doing that.
That's two different levels, right? Because educators view things differently to parents and vice versa.
Yeah.
I think as well, like if we're talking about your parents, so I guess this would apply also to educators, but when you're practically like on the ground thinking about building your caseload, obviously now speaking to new grads, if you've come into a new position and you're taking clients on, you would be building a caseload through assessments. The child comes in, and then you've then got to you've got to assess them, give them their diagnosis, figure out where they're at, and then convert the parent to then come to therapy. And sometimes that can be really difficult because you've only just met the parent in that first hour or whatever it is, hour and a half. And then all of a sudden you need to be giving them a really big recommendation. Like your child's going to need to be coming here once a fortnight, once a week, twice weekly for X amount of time, which is a big, that could be a big financial strain on the parent. That could be a big time commitment. It could be something like a lifelong issue. And so it does require some finesse to actually be able to do that in that time, because if you're going to have a really deep conversation with a friend, for example, you wouldn't go in the first hour and be that deep. You would have like time to build up, and you would build trust with that someone as you learn that they had your back and you've got their back. Whereas with a parent, it's very different, but it's so critical because you don't want to stuff it up, because you need to build that long-term relationship. But also for building your caseload, just from practical sake, you want to convert them. Obviously, the child ethically needs therapy, but that also makes your job easier, because if your job is just doing assessment after assessment after assessment after assessment, and you're not actually converting them to therapy, that is one that's really dissatisfying, because you're like basically just identifying all these children that need help, and then you're not actually helping them. But two, that is like a lot of emotional time and effort on you. And then you're not actually building your caseload. And it's just so much paperwork and reports. And when you actually get out of that new grad time, so, whether that's 12 months, then that next year going into, you've got a solid caseload, it's actually really smooth sailing. Know your clients, you know who's coming into your diary. Your planning is so much more efficient, because you're planning for the same kids each week, and you're not having to go, oh, I've got this new child. When we start with working with a child, it requires a lot more time and research and development and goal planning. So it actually, from a caseload point of view, it's a really important skill that you know how to talk to parents in that element, to then have like a really nice flow to your work and to be really feeling happy at work and satisfied because you're doing the therapy. So you're helping the problem you identified, but then you're not having a huge amount of paperwork on the side, which comes with assessments and new things. So I think it's a really important thing, which we're going to dive into now, some practical strategies and things that we would do to know how to build that rapport quickly, but then also how to get parents on board, like you said, to convert them to come to help the child long term. Because the last thing you want to do is you don't want to do an assessment, the child then come in for one session or two sessions, and then they discharge and say, I'm not coming back. If that
so much work.
Yeah,
Hey?
that's a lot of work. But if that does happen, I have learned that we have to actually critically think as a clinician, what can I do better? That's on me. What happened here? Let's explore this situation. Let's figure out what I can do better next time. Because obviously, like particularly if the child's got a diagnosis, a major diagnosis, and the parent hasn't spoken to you, like it depends how they discharge. But if they haven't spoken to you and they've just gone MIA, or you're not really clear on why they're finished up with the service, I would probably say, what did I do wrong? And that's taking responsibility.
That's what we need to be doing all the time, right? Like I feel like this is, I don't know whether we talked about it in those soft skills that we talked about in season 1, but I think having accountability and taking responsibility for your part in any relationship, whether that's in, a therapeutic sense or not, I think all we can control is how we behave in a situation. So I think that we need to that's like a mindset thing, isn't it? Like, what's my part here? How could I have done that differently or better? But I think, something that you are hitting the nail on the head with is retention is easier than generating like more clients from a, personal perspective, like just
from a work perspective, a flow perspective, like it's so much easier just knowing your kids, knowing who's coming in.
Like notes, all the admin, so much easier. So I think what we're trying to say here is when we kind of can nail this and we can retain clients, the flow in the work week and the term and the year is so much nicer, and the outcomes are going to be better, right? Because you've got that environment where you're going to thrive, they're going to thrive, you're going to get better outcomes, you're going to feel more fulfilled. And it's just, and I think that it's something that's overlooked, that retention piece. And, you and I just today were talking about client retention and setting KPIs around that. And that maybe that's something that's happening in workplaces that can feel a bit icky or uncomfortable. However, it's really in place because it's going to flow better. So I think it's just having that sort of mindset around taking responsibility and knowing that when we go above and beyond and we serve and we reflect on our part in it to always do our very best, we're going to make life easier for ourselves.
It will be, and you'll enjoy work because it's easier. It's easier. So practically, what does this look like? Because it is developing rapport, but I think it's a little bit more than that. I don't know what the word would be, but it's educating them, developing rapport, developing trust really quickly.
Yeah.
So obviously you've got your basic stuff like just like you would have in a normal relationship. So, knowing their name is super important, but, knowing where they live, what they do for work, if their life is busy, full, how many other kids do they have, what's going on in their life. Like I remember there was one client and she was just having this drama with her pool, and she was getting a new pool built in. So that was like our connection piece. So every week I'd be like, how's your pool going? And, is it almost completed yet, or what's happening? Oh, I feel you. That must be so frustrating. That is just knowing about them and knowing about something there. The way that you can not systemize that, but structure that is if you can grab onto something that is important, that's happening in their life over a period of time. if you can't find something, there's generally always like seasons. Oh, Christmas! Have you got Christmas concerts coming up? As we're recording this, we're coming into the busy Christmas season. How are kids going at school? When does your school wrap up? Like private schools finish a little earlier than public schools. Are you going away over Christmas? It's just asking them a whole bunch of questions that are about them personally. So that is rapport, right? That's rapport building, relationship building.
Absolutely. And I think like a really simple way to look at that is just doing a check-in. Like just have you checked in with the parent? Like do a check-in every single week. And that can be on any topic or just, it's helping them feel seen and heard. And I think, making it more personal.
And so when would you do this, Lizzy? Because I can hear clinicians now going, well, I don't have time to have a major check-in with the parents because we've got this much time and we need to get through this many goals and blah, 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 blah.
I would do this throughout the session. Like I feel like I can layer this into a session, but I feel like I've nailed engagement with children so that I can go to that next level and layer it in. But I tell my team, for educators like going into kindies and early learning settings and with parents, check in with them in the first 5 minutes. How are you going? I always recommend documenting, that piece, like the pool piece that you're saying, if there's something that you keep checking in with, pop it in your notes. Like mum said, I don't know, in-laws are in town or whatever. Yeah, whatever it is, like something that you can come back to them. And so when the child comes in, you engage with them and you can go, oh, how are you going with the pool?
Yeah, I know, because you never remember, like I never remembered that stuff. Don't put that mental load on your stuff. You've already got too many things to remember. Write it in the progress notes. Then when you're planning your session, just pop it in your notes or your plan. Highlight it if you need to so that it stands out to you. And then if you have one personal point, that's good because parents then will know that you've remembered them. And it's also really nice when you remember something that someone told you a week ago or a fortnight ago, that actually speaks volumes to people.
Absolutely. And do you know what I do if I'm struggling with the connection? I'll go one step further and I'll email them or text message, whatever, whatever works. But, I might say, I remember I was going into an early learning setting and I was getting like just hostile vibes. And the director told me that I think it was like I don't know, her brother or maybe a brother-in-law had passed away and they were going to the funeral. And I was like, oh, that's terrible, that I'm really sorry to hear that. And then I emailed a week later and just said, hey, how was your trip down the Gold Coast? I hope that it went as well as it could. After that, all good. She loved me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the remembering that's important.
Yeah.
I think as well, I would use the time. Well, if you're in an educator's room, I don't know if that would work, but if you're in a therapy setting, walking from the waiting room to the therapy space. When I worked in community health center, we had a really long walk from our offices all the way like to the front reception because it was like a public community health area. And so I always used to make sure that that was not a period of silence. And I think it's being aware of the silence because silence can make people feel really uncomfortable. Or if they don't feel uncomfortable, it can be like just a wasted moment. So pretty much from the time, I mean, a speech is probably good with this. From the time I saw a parent, I would not shut up. I was like a parrot, a talking parrot, because I would just be talking all the time. And same like you. So when I'm walking them to the therapy space, and then I would maybe engage the child at the same time. Like, so I'd be like, how was your weekend? Or you went to the show? Or, so you can sort of talk to the parent and the child at the same time. Like you said, in your therapy space. So I would do it when my child was sometimes picking games, but like I'd more sometimes be asking how you went with progress that week, with homework that week, or how they're going with whatever clinical goal we're working on is. And then in the sessions when my child is playing their game, which is the reinforcement component, then I would, maybe ask them a casual question. That
Mhm.
you have to do with discernment. If you have a chatty parent, I would never do that though. I would always do it at the end. But if you're trying to really build that relationship, then I would do it throughout the session. I think the other way that you can build the relationship really strongly is to come across really confident and strong in your clinical skills. And the way that you do that is you demonstrate your clinical skills to the parent as you're going in the session. So I would use it as like I'm teaching the parents or bringing awareness to the parents in the session. So say, for example, I was working on my language skills, or it could be any area really. I say the child says something to me. So say we're working on a concept, a child misses out a word in the sentence. I would then be giving feedback to the child saying, oh, let's try and put, all the words together, whatever the feedback is. And then I would say to the parent, did you see that? They really nailed that concept, but they left out that word. That's what I'm going to work on now. And I would just quickly add that in to the parent. So like demonstrating my clinical expertise and feedback with them, because now as a parent, I know that I just want strong clinicians to help my children. And so I get worried if I feel like the clinician is not confident in their skills, or they're not telling me information, because I think, do you really know what you're doing? And so sometimes as clinicians, we can think, I don't want to talk myself up. Like they should assume that I know what I'm doing because I've got a degree, or they've come to see a speech therapist and I've got the title after my name. But really, it's about you pointing out things to them clinically. And sometimes like we can feel really uncomfortable pointing out when the child is failing, or when the child is in, not doing what they need to be doing. But often the parent knows that. That's why they're there.
Exactly.
So attuned, they know that. And if you pick that up and say to them, oh, I've just noticed that they're not doing this. Is this like a standard for you? Have you noticed this at home? They will go, oh, either I haven't noticed that, and oh, you've picked that up, I'm glad we're here. Or they'll go, yes, this person knows what they're talking about because they have seen what I see. Which it doesn't,
Absolutely.
but it can just be something really simple. It could even be a behavioral thing. It doesn't even have to be clinical, like something you're working on. But you could say, oh, I've noticed like they don't like sitting on the floor. Like, oh, it could be anything
Yeah.
basic.
Absolutely. And I think that's just a really good opportunity to educate, because I think sometimes, particularly in pediatric therapy, it looks like we're just playing. And truth be told, we are playing, but we're layering therapeutic practices into our play. And I think that it's really important to identify that and educate parents how we're doing that so that they can do it as well. So, for example, I used to have a little boy that would come in. He was autism level 2, ADHD, and PDA. So he really, really difficult to get him to follow activities that I wanted to. So I had to kind of flow and find opportunities through play to layer in therapy. So one thing that we used to do was sword fighting. So I'd get him sword fighting and we'd do it like down really low and we'd go up high, but he was crossing the midline. He was, and I could see uh, tendencies in his strength and the way that he was moving. And I said to his dad that was there, I was like, look, I can see, he's crossing the midline, or he was resisting crossing the midline, actually. I was like, he's actually resisting to cross the midline with his right hand or whatever it was. So this is something that we can practice. So we're actually crossing the midline here. We're looking at how strong he is in both sides. We can get some squats in here. He's motivated by, like, he would do that for half an hour. And I said, we're getting all of these things. This is something that you can be doing at home. And it's kind of demonstrating the therapy based practices that you are doing that they can then go and do at home, that's in a fun way as well, because we want repetition, right? So there's an opportunity to connect here.
Yeah.
And I think with pediatric therapy, particularly with complex kids, it's about finding opportunity to get therapy into a playful activity that they enjoy so that we can get that repetition. But to do that, I think we need to layer in the education for the parents so that they understand that and they can repeat that.
And the education is key, because once they understand, they're motivated. And that's what I found with the education, which you probably do as well. Like, it's easier to do if you're doing like squats, like they know why they would need to squat. But with the language, and I do this in the PLA, is that we talk about the functional implications of why we're doing what we're doing, which is the
Yes.
education piece. So we'll talk about, okay, we need to understand this, like, top and bottom, maybe for writing letters when they go to school, we start at the top of it and we work down, for reading, writing. So, figuring out what motivates the parents, why they're there, but then educating them through the functional implications. And sometimes that can be a bit tricky if you're feeling like you're targeting a concept that is way out of left field. But I mean, in the PLA, that's what I've done with every single language goal. I tell you what the functional implications are, and I use that in our parent scripts. But then that's how it makes it easier for them to do at home, because then they can go, oh, like, they're like, oh, we can do this activity, and I can just incorporate it into that activity, which as a parent, as a busy parent, I go, thank you, because I don't have time to sit here and think about how I can get Evie to do something at home. If you just tell me, I'm like, oh, that actually helps me as a parent so much.
Absolutely. I was doing an intensive with a kindergarten last week, and I was doing a executive function task. And so I was standing up in front of the kids, and I was saying, holding my hands up and then moving one hand. And I was saying to them, point to the hand that's not moving. And they all struggled with it. And I was like, this is an executive function skill. So this is, and I kind of explained to the teachers, we might have inhibitory control, impulse control issues. And they were
That's a
like,
language
yes,
goal.
yes,
Negative, negatives.
yes. Like all of it. They were like, oh my gosh, that's why it's happening. I'm like, this is a really good activity for you to practice with them. Another really good activity that you can be doing is a simple musical freeze game, like musical statues, if you're my age. It's now called freeze, PS. Kids call it freeze. I'm like, let's play musical statues. And they're like looking at me what is that? Anyway, so another good one is, and do they have the ability to, follow the instructions and stop the behavior of dancing, like stop that to when the music stops? That's another really good way for us to measure their, an executive function skill. And that's so easy to describe while you're doing it.
Yes, you educate while you're doing. A lot of people, that's how a lot of people learn. They learn through movement, they learn through hearing, they learn through touch. So it's like combining all those together, and it helps them remember to do it at home.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, so we sort of talked about how you can, do that clinically in your session. The other thing is, I think particularly in assessment sessions, but also in therapy sessions, but at the start, is I always affirm the parent of their place, and I always compliment them, and I confirm that they are a good parent. And I think that in an assessment session, that goes so far, because they often, when you're coming, they probably got their own insecurities. Like, have I not read enough to my child? Have I not spoken enough to my child? Have I not given them enough opportunities? Like, is it me? And so, but also then, if a parent is feeling threatened, a very simple compliment, an affirmation of their place as the role as the mother or the father, can actually just break down those barriers. And I learned that as a new grad, kind of through like just stumbling through it. Not that I could set out to do it, but I had a really difficult mum. She would come in and she'd cross her arms all the time, and she'd be really close with her body language and really difficult to get in, to talk to. I'd try all the questions. I'd say, how are you going? What's happening? And she'd say, oh, not much. And I found that I would just say to her, like, I can see that, like, her child, like little B there, he's doing so well. Like, you're such a great mum. You're doing so well with him. He's got these difficulties and these challenges, but it's so great that you're bringing him. And, like, they're deep compliments. Sometimes I'd say, I love your shirt as well.
Yeah, I was going to say I do that quite a lot. I'm like, oh, I like your pants.
Yeah, but affirming the as a role as the mother, I found that really broke her down. And she
Yeah.
was like, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it funny how, like, that's just praise, isn't it? It's acknowledgement. And I talk about that in my course, and in reference to children, I talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of motivation and what they need. And one of those top level ones is praise. They need feedback. And what's good for kids is good for adults. It's the
Yeah,
same principles.
same needs. And I think as well, like sometimes parents will view you as the authority because they're bringing their child to you. So it actually means a lot to them to hear someone in authority, like, or, you know, being the expert or the speechy or the EP saying, like, you're a great mum. Like, it's not just like their friend telling them, it's a professional. And so it goes a little bit further to creating that relationship. And, you know, I think it helps then your therapeutic relationship because you'll say, you're an excellent mum. You know what they need. I'm here to partner with you to then help you where, you know, you might know about communication or with, in your case, movement, and we're going to work together. So you form that partnership, which we did speak about in Power to the Parents, a previous episode, but it's affirming them to their place. And then, like you said, Lizzy, then you say, and you ask for feedback. So you say at any time, because you know your child best,
Yeah,
affirmation.
I was going to say that.
If you have feedback for me, I'd love to know how I can work better with them, if there's a way that I can talk to them or an activity, or, you know, if I can do something a bit better. You know them best, you let me know. I'm so open to hearing. And again,
Parents are our
feedback.
best resource.
Yeah.
Like they're our best resource in really truly understanding what is going on with the child and what works and what doesn't work. Let's not try and guess it. Let's just ask and be okay with asking. Like I say to my girls, you need to advocate for yourself in terms of what you need to do the best job. So you need to ask the questions of what you need to know. Like, don't be afraid to ask the questions.
Exactly.
These parents are there for a reason.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the other thing that is really important, and this really has worked for me with both educators and parents, is just trying to understand them. So if they're being short, if they're, you know, if they're standoffish, maybe they're anxious. Because let's face it, like if you've got a complex child and you're going, oh, maybe they're tired. And again, you know, building the trust to understand what's going on for them, I think is really important, so that we can understand where they're coming from and we can help them with how they're feeling, or at least understand, and again, you know, modify how we might do something based on their understanding.
Exactly. And that's just going to help your relationship, help that build. The other thing you touched on, Lizzy, was you sent maybe a text message or an email. That's something really practical that you can do, particularly if the primary parent or caregiver is not bringing the child. If you've got a communication book or an app, whatever you're using, it's looking at if there's any barriers to that communication and make sure you overcome those as well, because you know, the parents need to know that your concern is genuine, not just based on if they're there or if they're not there. And parents really appreciate that as well.
Absolutely. I find, because we go into obviously schools and education facilities, if we're not seeing the parent, it actually saves us a lot of time. We've had situations where if we haven't checked in with the parent and then they, you know, maybe the child said something, or, you know, something's come up and then they've contacted us and said, oh, you know, little Indy said X, Y, and Z. When if we went to them and just said, hey, update from today, this and this and this went well. Indy did this really well and had a really good time. We're kind of getting to them first so they can go, oh, cool, rather than, oh, I wonder how that went today, or I wonder if they went today. Did they even go?
Yeah.
And I think I've got two examples from a parent's perspective on that. I've got a private speechy that we pay privately, and if Pete takes Flinny, she will send me a message and say, oh, Flinny did well, or Flinny was a bit tired today, so we didn't do this. Can you do this at home? And we see a speechy at school and I get zero updates. And I've actually had to chase several times and go, are you still seeing Flynn? You know, what are you working on? Da 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 da. And from a parent's perspective, I can tell you 100 times over, I'd prefer to receive a text message.
Yeah, exactly. We're all busy, right? But we always want to know what's happening with our child. Always.
Especially if they're struggling with something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So there's lots of practical things in there that you can do to build that relationship with your parents, to get them on board in the therapy. Like we said, it's so important. And then you can also understand from a parent's point of view, with us two being mums. So if you want to learn more about how to get parents on board, like I said, we do have another episode previously that we talked about power to the parents, which is a good one to listen to. And then if you're a speechy and you're wanting to really refine this and you're really not sure and you're feeling a bit in the dark, jump into my PLA library, because I have a script exactly on how I talk to parents and what I do. I pretty much do all of this, highlight all the functional implications and everything so that you can get the parents on board. It's kind of like you hit and you need to, what is it? No, aim and you need to hit. Because if you don't, then it's gone. Like we said, it's important. And Lizzy, you've got stuff, like you said, mentioned in your course with talking to parents as well.
Yeah, I've got a whole piece on engagement, and I reference a really amazing research article that talked about engaging children and just the different levels of communication that you need. So yeah, that's in my courses as well.
Yeah, so you can definitely learn more about this topic. And if you are a speechy or an EP and you have loved this episode, share this with your peers or your colleagues so that they can also learn. We need to build ourselves up and build our professions up together. And thank you for listening. Leave us a review or let us know what you've loved. We always love to hear. And we will see you in the next episode.